Our story begins with a very intelligent high school girl who carries a serious aura of a diligent student and who simply hates any male being. She believes that since the oldest times, men can only think of one thing, and that our primate brains have not evolved enough to focus on anything other than playing tasty little jokes and then leaving after breaking girls' hearts. This contempt for men only gets worse because of her father, the most famous author in Japan, specialized in writing books full of suspicious scripts, if you know what I mean. Result: she has developed a deep rancor toward all men, and today only cares about studying hard to get into a top university and get rid of her father and any man who dares cross her path. But everything changes when she meets the flirting demon Takumi, the most popular boy in the class, who always finds a way to get close to her. But she, always direct, tells him to disappear, as she easily sees through his good boy facade and knows that, deep down, he only wants her to fall in love so that in the end the two can join beds in Minecraft. Meanwhile, Takumi's friends burst out laughing at another one of his failed attempts, and she leaves the room determined to keep her full focus on studying, leaving Takumi believing she truly hates him. But her classmates make clear that she doesn't talk to anyone, not just him. At home, her father welcomes her as always, complaining loudly and throwing a tantrum until she makes her favorite dessert, which only reinforces her aversion to men. When she says she doesn't want male contact that night, her father understands, as any healthy father would, that she is in heat, and already starts planning a scheme to help. The next day, the girl begins to think about the creative ideas that Takumi surely hides under that messy hair, and decides that the best course is to take firm action and make it clear, once and for all, that she hates the guy. Later, during PE class, the teacher asks her to go to the infirmary to check on Takumi, who has twisted his ankle. She sees there the perfect chance to break his heart, and maybe even his tiny katana, if necessary. When she arrives there, she finds Takumi all embarrassed and avoiding eye contact, which makes her waver a little. But soon she remembers that every man is a walking piece of trash and refocuses. But when she goes to say what she wanted, she sees her father spying through the window with signs encouraging playing malicious little jokes with Takumi, and in desperation, she throws herself on top of the boy to prevent him from seeing her father. Ironically, she ends up giving him a much better view than she imagined. After that, the two are all awkward, unable even to look at each other. When she finally gathers the courage to continue her plan, her father activates Operation Watermelon, revealing his daughter's scheme to Takumi. But to everyone's surprise, instead of jumping on her as she expected, Takumi simply treats her with respect and says he is in love. The shock is so great that she is paralyzed. On the way home, she barely remembers what happened after the confession and doesn't know how to react, still unsure about Takumi's true intentions. The next morning, she remains obsessed thinking about what to say. Then she decides to devise a plan. She will change her look so much that Takumi will totally lose interest. But the next day, everyone loves her new style, and Takumi becomes even more enchanted by this new studious version of her. Seeing that the plan failed spectacularly, she tries the opposite, dress as tacky as the protagonists of anime harems. But Takumi appears again, and the two end up alone on the rooftop talking. When Takumi, exhausted from the roller coaster of emotions, starts to doze off, she sees the perfect chance to peek at his miniature katana to measure its size. She slowly approaches, moved by curiosity, and just when she is about to touch his magic staff, Takumi catches her in the act. But upon seeing the size of his hand, she concludes that his sushi roll must also be gigantic, and accidentally blurts out that she can't date Takumi because it's too big to fit inside her. Men, brothers. Takumi, of course, doesn't understand anything and replies that you only know by trying, which she interprets as a desire to merge storylines, which sends her mind straight to a cell. Even so, she says she will think about it. Back at home, her father decides to give a little push to this new relationship and appears with a pile of very educational books, if you know what I mean. The next day, she is still confused by everything that happened the previous day, so she decides to read a bit to clear her head, but realizes that the book in her hands is one of her father's most suspicious works. She ends up imagining Takumi playing some different little jokes with her. As they say, the little saints are the most dangerous. Meanwhile, Takumi approaches excitedly, wanting to study together using his new English book. But Ao, lost in daydreams, panics and unintentionally throws her book at his, causing them to swap books without noticing. Thinking that she made him uncomfortable, Takumi apologizes, while Ao is so unsettled that she can barely speak. Later, she realizes she has Takumi's book and not her father's, and runs after him. Luckily, she catches up before he leaves. They sit on a bench, and thinking that Takumi read the spicy parts of the book, Ao believes that he wants something indecent right there in public, and flustered, suggests that maybe it's not a good idea. But Takumi, misunderstanding everything and thinking she's talking about studying, responds that he sees no problem with doing it outdoors. Ao is shocked. She demands her book back, but Takumi, joking, says she's so cute that he can't resist teasing her. In the end, he returns the book and suggests they study English together later. Only then does Ao realize he didn't even open her father's book, leaving her mortified by what she had insinuated. As if that weren't enough, later she panics remembering the school trip, afraid of embarrassing moments with Takumi. Her father, of course, insists she goes, secretly hoping his daughter lives one of the scenes from his dubious books. Help. On the day of the trip, Ao is a nervous wreck, thinking classmates will try to force adult things. While freaking out, she bumps into Takumi and, nervous, steps away quickly because he makes her heart race. Takumi, on the other hand, finds her reactions adorable. But his comment draws the attention of other students who hear everything and surround Ao, wanting to know if there is something between her and Takumi. Trying to escape, the klutz enters the wrong room just as Takumi's friends arrive. Desperate, she hides inside a locker. The friends leave to get something to drink and Takumi is left alone. When he opens the locker, he gets a fright finding Ao there squeezed in. For some reason, only aliens would understand. Worse, unintentionally, Takumi makes her even more embarrassed upon exit. She trips and falls on top of him just as everyone returns. Red-faced, she blurts, "It's not what it looks like." But no one buys her story. Later, during the courage test, the girls plan to leave Ao and Takumi together, hoping to give a little push to something more happening. But as they walk, Ao feels an urgent need to pee. When she finally finds a little place, she gets startled feeling a mysterious hand touching her and runs back to Takumi. He goes to investigate and discovers there was nothing supernatural. Only then, he notices that her skirt is lifted. Trying to discreetly warn her, Takumi signals, but Ao doesn't understand and thinks he is talking about her volume. Ao, believing Takumi is obsessed with her private baker, enters a collapse of embarrassment and runs away again. Takumi tries to calm her, offers his jacket, but she thinks he wants her to take off clothes and flees again. In the rush, she twists her ankle. Takumi helps her and, in a rare, serious moment, says she's special to him. Ao thinks that finally a kiss will happen, but he just covers her with the jacket and says her skirt was lifted the whole time. She's speechless. Later, we see a childhood flashback. Ao being mercilessly ridiculed by classmates until a boy defends her. Back to the present, she wakes up startled from a nightmare and faces her father, who enters the room and hands her a letter. Upon opening it, Ao is shocked to see a photo of Takumi hugging another girl. And worse, her father reveals that it was that same girl who delivered the letter. If Ao was already nervous, now anger and jealousy take over. The next day at school, Ao can barely concentrate, already imagining the possibility of having to share Takumi with someone else. Later that day, as she admired how amazing Takumi looked, some girls started commenting on how lucky Ao was to have such a handsome and athletic boyfriend, which she quickly denied. But things got even more absurd when one of Takumi's friends popped up out of nowhere and started teasing him, saying he was way too hot to date just one girl. That's when the jealousy hit hard, and Ao, with an icy glare, told Takumi to never speak to her again and stormed off, vowing to focus 100% on her studies from that moment on. That same day, Ao stuffs herself with cake, trying to numb the pain, but thinking about that photo of Takumi with another girl sparks an uncontrollable urge to rip it into tiny pieces. That's when Miyabi, the girl in the photo, shows up. She also used to be Ao's classmate. She explains that she was at that group date with Takumi. And then comes the bombshell. Miyabi reveals that during the outing, Takumi confessed he had feelings for Ao, and she was charmed by his honesty. So charmed, in fact, that now she's decided she wants Takumi all to herself. Without mincing words, she asks if she can have him, and even adds that she can't stand girls like Ao, who are lucky enough to have an amazing guy and don't even notice it. In the middle of this tension, Ao gets a call from Takumi, who tries to explain and says he was forced to go on that group date, practically begging for forgiveness. But Ao coldly says it doesn't matter. After all, they're not even officially dating, and he's probably just messing with her feelings. Takumi, hurt, says he'll never talk to her again and hangs up on the spot, leaving both of them heartbroken. Even though the picture of Takumi with Miyabi was fake, digitally edited. The next day, Takumi sticks to his promise and completely ignores Ao. To make things worse, Ao sees Miyabi constantly approaching Takumi. When she asks her father why boys lose interest, he says it's either because the girl doubts their feelings, or when another girl comes along who's willing to go all the way, which sends Ao into a panic. Sometime later, Ao and her father go to a local festival together, but they end up bumping into Takumi and Miyabi there too, clearly on a date. And to make things even worse, Miyabi is following a super weird dating manual that was written by Ao's own father. At one point, Takumi and Ao end up together in a haunted house, but the darkness and scary sounds make it impossible to tell who's who. As they walk through the place, each of them starts talking about their crush without realizing who they're with, trying to show how much they care about the person. But when lightning illuminates the room, they finally see each other and, in a complete misunderstanding, Ao thinks Takumi was talking about Miyabi, and he thinks Ao is already involved with another guy. Both storm off angrily, leaving even the haunted house monsters uncomfortable with the heavy atmosphere. Later, Miyabi, who never misses a chance to stir things up, starts filling Takumi's head with claims that Ao is the type always surrounded by swooning fans and constantly switching guys. Out of nowhere, she confesses her feelings for Takumi and throws herself into his arms right as Ao appears in the distance. And because the universe loves a bit of drama, Ao sees it all and watches in shock as the two walk into a hotel together. Later on, Ao is trying to relax in the bathtub, but all she can imagine are the worst possible things Takumi and Miyabi might be doing in that hotel. And before she knows it, she passes out from the heat. Suddenly, Takumi shows up out of nowhere, teleportation clearly, and when Ao wakes up, totally confused, she wonders why he's there instead of with Miyabi. But before he can say anything, her father enters and explains that Takumi showed up to check on her and ended up being persuaded to carry her in his arms like a true romance hero. But Ao, still annoyed, explodes and calls Takumi a two-timer, telling him to go back to the hotel with Miyabi. Takumi tries to stay calm and explains that they tried to enter the hotel just to rest, but were turned away for being students. While waiting outside, he started talking about Ao, which made Miyabi storm off. Since Ao still doesn't believe it, Takumi insists he's never done anything improper in his life, and runs off in embarrassment, leaving Ao completely speechless. The next morning, before school, a storm breaks outside, but Ao hardly notices, practically skipping down the street. Happy as can be, Ao walks with a spring in her step, just thinking that maybe she has more experience than Takumi, since she has the technical knowledge of her own father. Later, the two go to a cafe to study English, but things spiral when Takumi, trying to impress her, blurts out a super suggestive sentence in English, leaving Ao red as a tomato. Of course, Takumi doesn't even realize what he just said. And guess what? The book he's using is another gem written by Ao's dad. On the way home, the conversation drifts into adult desires, and Ao, thinking she's in control, starts bragging. But Takumi casually says he figures that stuff is old news for her. Ao, flustered, admits that she's actually as inexperienced as he is. And before he can say anything, she bursts into tears and runs off. Later, Miyabi is enjoying her coffee when Ao suddenly barges in. Miyabi braces herself, thinking Ao came to mock her for being rejected by Takumi, but Ao simply hugs her and confesses she's terrified of guys like Takumi, leaving Miyabi stunned. The next day, Ao is in panic, just imagining that Takumi has found out her biggest secret. She's never even come close to doing anything adult. Meanwhile, her father is meditating under a waterfall, looking like a literary monk seeking inspiration for his next book. That's when Yabi, his editor and old friend, shows up looking like he hasn't slept in days waiting for the new manuscript. But he brushes it off and invites them to a meat festival, which, like everything in anime, is packed with plot. At the festival, Ao runs into Miyabi, who's working there, and is shocked. Miyabi, on the other hand, doesn't waste time, and bluntly says Ao doesn't match the vibe there at all. Then Takumi suddenly appears, revealing he's working with Miyabi, and Ao's jealousy skyrockets when she hears him calling Miyabi by her first name, while with her, it's like a business contract. Shortly after, Yab shows up, and Miyabi's eyes sparkle when she sees how good-looking he is. When Yab calls Ao by her first name and introduces himself as her father's partner, Takumi gets visibly annoyed and says Yab is overstepping with his precious Ao. Yab just smiles and says he and Ao have a great relationship, making Takumi even more jealous. But before things boil over, Miyabi drags Takumi back to work. Watching the scene, Yab comments that they look like a couple, which crushes Ao. At work, Takumi can't stop thinking about what happened with Yab and Ao, even with Miyabi trying to cheer him up. Meanwhile, Ao is so caught up in thoughts of the two of them together that she loses sight of Yab. Panicked, she bumps into Takumi, who's on break. Without wasting time, he directly asks what's going on between her and Yab. But Yab shows up right then, saying it's time to leave. They've gathered enough material for the new book. Takumi then musters the courage, grabs Ao by the arm, and calls her by her first name, leaving her flustered. Out of nowhere, he throws her over his shoulders, like he's losing his grip, and runs off with her in his arms. At a nearby park, Takumi calms down and finally opens up. He says he can't stand the weird tension between them anymore. With eyes full of resolve, he gets closer and declares that he's going to make Ao fall in love with him. The next day, she finds out her grades have dropped and even faints from the shock. Fast forward to summer, Ao checks into a hotel known for being ideal for serious study and getting grades back on track. But just as she starts getting organized, Takumi casually shows up, and she nearly faints again, this time from his charisma and ripped body. Takumi invites her to enjoy the beach a bit, but Ao immediately refuses, determined to avoid any distractions. However, when Miyabi shows up mysteriously, Ao changes her mind and decides to go too. Since she didn't bring a swimsuit, Her plan was to study 24/7. Ao goes shopping with Miyabi. But the one she chooses is way too modest, and Miyabi convinces her to go for something bolder. Soon after, Ao shows her new swimsuit to Takumi. Takumi is left speechless, so stunned by Ao's swimsuit that he even forgets how to speak Japanese. Then the two enjoy the beach, and Ao, gathering her courage, asks why Takumi calls Miyabi by her first name. He replies that he already knows someone else with the same last name and wants to avoid confusion. But Ao isn't satisfied and fishes for a compliment, asking what he thinks of the swimsuit. Without blinking, Takumi says she looks so beautiful he wishes no one else could see her, and that it would be better if she wore one of those old-fashioned bathing suits. Ao is so stunned, she can only blurt out the first thing that comes to mind. She points out they're alone, completely unaware that their friends are spying on them at that very moment. When she realizes what she just said, her face turns beet red and she tries to walk away, but Takumi catches up and asks if that means she's ready. Ao's mind collapses, thinking that scene is finally going to happen, and shyly says, yes, she's ready. Except when Takumi starts carrying her back to the shore, Ao realizes he just wanted to know if she was ready to leave the water and get back to studying. Outraged by his complete lack of malice and by herself for overthinking, Ao spends the rest of the day fuming, unable to open a single book. That night, she can't stop thinking about how Takumi has never tried anything, even with all the chances she's given him. She figures that if the roles were reversed, she'd have pounced 1,000 times already, because she's thirstier than a fish out of water. That's when a crazy plan is born. She's going to awaken Takumi's naughty side, and when he's finally ready to pounce, she'll dump him. The next day, Ao gathers every suspicious food item that might activate Takumi. But her dad walks into the kitchen, sees the spread, and thinking his daughter's plotting something indecent, decides to help in the absolute worst way by adding a special ingredient. The next day, Ao invites Takumi on a picnic. He's feeling down after losing badly at a soccer match, and the girls suggest Ao cheer him up while they head to karaoke. Alone together, Ao launches her plan and hands him the lunch she made. Takumi is excited, but suddenly starts to feel hot and confused. Out of nowhere, the two find themselves in a super intimate moment, on the verge of stepping into the plot paradise. But Takumi backs off and says she should go, because he's not feeling well. Frustrated, Ao blurts out that she can't believe he didn't take advantage again. Embarrassed, Takumi admits he wants to, but only if it's for love. Those words melt Ao's heart. Realizing she likes him so much she can't even focus anymore, she gathers the courage to tell him to never ask her out again. She needs to focus on her studies. That night, she feels an empty void in her chest, but convinces herself she did the right thing, while finding comfort in one of her dad's bizarre dolls. Meanwhile, Takumi is buried in books, determined to get into the same university as his beloved Ao. The next day, Ao gets to school and is shocked to see Takumi no longer speaking to her, even though she was the one who asked for it. His cold treatment hits like a punch to the gut, and though she tries to focus on the upcoming test, the pain won't go away. Back home, Ao tries to study with Yab, but can't stop thinking about Takumi. Seeing she's not making any progress, Yab decides to punish her in a way that only makes sense in anime. He makes Ao wear an embarrassingly revealing maid outfit. Later, Takumi shows up at her house and bumps into Yab, who warns him not to distract Ao. She's studying. But Takumi insists he needs to see her one last time. If she says no again, he'll give up for good. Impressed by his resolve, Yab lets him in. He finds Ao in her room, and she's just somewhat shaken. Ao wonders if she might be a bad influence on Takumi, so he tells her he'll leave her alone from now on, because he loves her too much. He turns to leave, but Ao's mind fills with dark and confused thoughts, and on impulse, she calls him back and begs him to stay. Takumi smiles, touched, and the two hug tightly. The mood heats up, and Ao starts getting overwhelmed when Takumi asks if he can open her bento. She surprises him by saying yes and even takes his hand, guiding it toward her plot line. They look at each other with passion, ready to take it further, until Ao's dad, of course, ruins everything by filming the scene like a complete creep. Takumi, mortified, apologizes over and over, but her dad tells him not to worry. He understands how young love is. After all that, Takumi, excited about their newfound connection, says he has something important to ask. Ao's heart races, thinking it's a confession, and she blurts out, "Yes," before he even says anything. But in reality, Takumi just wanted to suggest that they study together to get into the same college. He even says he'll hold back his feelings until then. Ao, slightly disappointed but focused, decides she's going to ace the exams. And once they're in college, they'll finally live out those special moments. A few weeks later, the class starts preparing for the sports festival. Ao, who hates sports, isn't thrilled until she hears Takumi is going to be a cheerleader. Her eyes light up imagining him in a cute cheer outfit. At home, she mentions the festival to her dad, who immediately says he'll be there to cheer her on. But Ao, knowing full well how dramatic he is, shuts it down instantly. Even with his promises of good behavior, Ao says she doesn't want to see him there at all. This leads to a fight, and the two stop talking for days. The day of the festival arrives. Ao feels a void seeing that her dad isn't in the crowd, and starts regretting what she said. Takumi notices something's off and she tells him about the fight with her father. He comforts her, saying everything will work out, making her smile a little. As they part ways, her dad appears and, in a sincere moment, they both apologize and decide to let go of their resentment. With that weight off her chest and feeling the support of her dad and Takumi, Ao gets ready for the race with full energy. When her dad starts yelling embarrassing things about her body, Ao runs even faster just to shut him up, and wins the race. Later, in the infirmary, her dad shows up all bandaged after getting smacked by his own daughter. Takumi arrives to check on them and, right on cue, her dad asks if he liked what he heard about Ao's body. Takumi, embarrassed, admits he did, leaving Ao crying with emotion, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Sometime later, in classic dramatic mode, Ao tells Takumi they might need to stop studying together because they always end up getting too distracted. But the truth is, she's afraid they'll end up exploring each other's plot lines. Takumi asks if she's afraid of being alone with him, which Ao denies while trying to act tough. Then he casually invites her to study at his place over the weekend, and adds that no one will be home. Ao's mind immediately flies to Narnia, but she agrees. That night, nervous and excited, Ao goes online and buys silk lingerie, just in case. The next day the package arrives, and of course her dad sees it, and instantly assumes it's some erotic outfit for Takumi. Ao denies it, mortified, even though for the first time he's actually right. The weekend arrives and she heads to Takumi's house. They dive into studying, but as the hours go by and he still hasn't made a move, Ao starts to get impatient. She starts dropping hints, but it's like talking to a wall. Not giving up, she switches tactics and starts giving hints so obvious. They might as well be flashing neon signs, but unfortunately, Takumi is that classic anime character who doesn't understand a single signal. Suddenly, with pure innocence, Takumi suggests that if they both do well on the exams, they can each ask the other to do anything they want. Ao starts imagining all the possibilities and excitedly asks what he'd request. But to her shock, Takumi just says he wants her to make him another bento, leaving Ao stunned. That's when it clicks. If she really wants something more intense with Takumi, she'll have to earn it. So she becomes the most dedicated student in school, determined to get perfect scores and claim what she wants. But things go sideways. In the middle of all the studying, Ao pushes herself too hard, gets sick, and ends up missing the exams, which means she can't ask Takumi for anything. Weeks later, Ao is casually having ice cream when she runs into Miyabi, who works at the ice cream shop. Without wasting time, Miyabi asks if Ao finally made a move on Takumi during all this time. With a dramatic sigh, Ao admits that absolutely nothing happened. Miyabi then gives her advice. Just go kiss him already. Stop waiting for that clueless guy to figure it out. On her way home, Ao starts overthinking, as always, and decides to try being more pure like Takumi, since he doesn't seem to have any ulterior motives and is willing to wait until college. The next day, Ao dives into her studies, and Takumi quickly notices she's no longer clumsy like before. Later, he asks if she's okay, and Ao, trying to hide her feelings, blurts out that she's frustrated they've never even kissed. In response, Takumi asks if she wants to try now. Ao says yes, trying to stay calm, but at the moment of the kiss, Takumi hesitates, thinking they're not ready yet. But Ao doesn't let the chance slip. She kisses him anyway, nearly fainting from happiness. That night, while cooking without even noticing how much food she's made for her dad, Ao keeps replaying every second of the kiss in her head. The next day, Takumi approaches, and Ao turns bright red, still unsure how to process what happened. But she can't stop thinking, how did Takumi get so good at this? Her mind starts spiraling with jealousy, imagining he must have kissed tons of girls before. Driven by this wild idea, she storms off fuming. The truth, however, is that Takumi only practiced with a pillow. Ao was his first real kiss too. Later, the two meet in the library, but decide to head somewhere more private. There, they have an honest conversation, and Ao shyly admits it was her first kiss, afraid of seeming too inexperienced and losing Takumi's interest. But he, just as bashful, confesses it was his first too. With that, the two finally understand each other, and Takumi sneaks in another kiss. That's when Ao realizes her chances of ever going back to serious studying are officially ruined forever. Thanks for watching this anime recap. Hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next video.